What was hydroxychloroquine used for prior to COVID?
So it's used. So I had a fair amount of experience in it, using it for malaria treatment. Okay, so it's used as a malaria prophylaxis, malaria treatments. So it's already an antiviral that we already know of, and and it's also used for prophylaxis and for treatment with people with autoimmune diseases, like lupus, and so it's used, and I had a lot of experience. I'd gone on 3 humanitarian trips with 50 plus people both times, and I probably wrote at least half of those prescriptions for the people that were going on it. So I knew how to write it, how to prescribe it. It's a different prescription protocol for prophylaxis. It's just once a week, but I had people that had taken it. Probably a couple hundred people that I'd already written prescriptions for. So I knew how to write the prescription. I knew what the side effects were. I knew what people, were complaining about, upset stomach, those kinds of things that typically people would get. People were talking about, elongated or prolonged QT intervals and those things on cardiac and EKGs. I never saw any of that. I mean, and again, I don't have tremendous experience in writing it, but I'd never had any.
Because what we were discussing back in 2020, I remember, was as far as why, how earlier we were talking about if you wanted the vaccines, then they would send you this ancillary package, right, with the needles and the alcohol swabs and gloves and everything that you needed to administer it, right? But what they never did was, for instance, in 2020, if you remember, we were discussing this back then, is if for example, the United States, 350 million people, right? If they sent each one of us an e-kit, like, right, where it consisted of hydroxychloroquine, the Z-Pack, I'd say maybe the dexamethasone or whatever else, zinc, this, that, vitamin C, it wouldn't cost them more than $10 per person. Right? Send it to everybody, 350 million times 10, that's $3.5 billion. Not a lot of money for the government. And we could have all had it at home and listen, guys, just take this as a precautionary prophylactic, however you want to look at it. And if you do get the virus, just quarantine yourself. You don't need to quarantine half the world or the entire country. And let's see what happens. But none of that was ever done. It was just about quarantine. Everybody has to quarantine. Then you have to register yourself and make sure you report it to the health department so we know exactly. It was all about numbers. Let's increase the numbers. Oh, look how many. It was kind of like this clicking time bomb that was going on in the news. Now we have 200,000 deaths. So we have 200,000 cases. Which all of it was BS.
Well, you got to keep pounding it into people's head. Going back to what you were saying about the numbers, right? You said it was going to cost a couple $2 billion to send everybody a kit, right?
Yeah.
So look at this. Look at this statistic. So the COVID policies for the U.S. government and the economy, it costed us an estimated $14 trillion.
Compare that to
$14 trillion.
$3.5 billion. Okay, let's say I'm under calculating, not 3.5, $14 billion versus 14 trillion.
Yeah.
That's 1,000 times more.
So with ivermectin, and I believe it was ivermectin, it could have been hydroxychloroquine, but the province, I don't know what they call them in India, whether it's a province or a state, but Uttar Pradesh at the time did that. And they handed out, again, I don't remember if it was ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine.
I think it was ivermectin.
And they gave a kit to everybody. Mm-hmm. And then, their health department or the people that were involved in it were going around and just handing these things out. And they had the lowest incidence of COVID of anywhere else in the world.
And India, probably the cleanest country in the world, right?
Right.
The most sanitary.
Correct. Absolutely. Especially the street vendors, man. They're amazing, bro. You don't have to worry about getting any sort of salmonella poisoning when you're going out there. But
Arman, that's the point. That's not what they were trying to do. Okay. That was not the objective. The objective was not to have a treatment for this. The objective was to have a society that was going to accept the launch of a new technology in the vaccines. COVID was invented for the vaccines, not the other way around.
I love how these doctors come on and you guys are literally confirming that COVID was invented.
Yeah.
But the bullshit behind all of it was the media continuously saying, "Oh, it was a bat soup," or "Patient Zero was infected by I don't know what was it. What was one of the other things that they were mentioning by some sort of
Pangolin.
penguin or whatever.
A pangolin.
Yeah, a pangolin or whatever it was.
Pangolin and a bat got together, and
Yeah, and you were
they
like,
made everybody sick.
and everybody fell for it.
Right.
Everybody fell for it. But long and behold, this shit was in the labs years ago.
Right.
Years ago. Fast forward to 2021 now.
So here, hold on a second.
Go ahead.
Depending on who you look at, okay, the WHO by the end of January was already on the. I think they declared a public health emergency of international concern, which if you sound it out, PHEIK or EIC sounds like fake, okay, which is what it was. All right, and I think
there's humor in all that.
There's humor in it in a way, but I also think they're telling you exactly what it is that they're doing. Okay, but by the end of January, depending on whose statistics you look at, there were 44 cases of COVID worldwide and 1 death by the end of January, okay, of 2020.
But that's when everything was beginning to pick up.
40, they had already called the world, like a not a pandemic, but they'd already called it an epidemic. They'd already called it like, hey, we have something that's really worrisome. You have a country of 1.4 billion people and you're worried about 44 cases of pneumonia, okay, and 1 death. How many cases of pneumonia and how many cases of viral infections and how many people are admitted to, hospitals and everybody else in a city? I mean, I think Wuhan itself is 14 million people. Okay. And so you're talking about in Wuhan, you have 44 cases and 1 death. And all of a sudden it's something to worry about. Okay. Again, the foundation upon which this whole thing was developed was just nuts. Okay. It was so, contrived, and when you go back and you look at it now, or you just kind of like all of this stuff was just done on purpose. It was done so that they could get this vaccine, so that they could convince people that it was safe and effective. You fear monger them, you instill enough fear in them that they'll actually do anything that you want them to do. The Milgram experiments and the Ash experiments in the 50s and 60s showed that, and the psychological experiments that they did on people showed that when you get somebody to do the first thing that you want them to do, okay, wear a mask, social distance, whatever the first thing is that you want them to do, and to abide by what it is that you're telling them, 92% of those people will then do the next thing that you want them to do. The Milgram experiments showed that 2/3 of people with a doctor standing over their shoulder with a clipboard will implement or will give a subject a shock when they answer their questions the wrong way. That's all it was. Asking them questions, and you can hear the people screaming. It was all actors, okay? And they didn't know that. But when you had an expert standing over your shoulder, 2/3 of people would then give that person a deadly shock for not answering the right question. 67% of those people would give a deadly shock just because somebody stood over their shoulder and told them to do it, for not answering a question the right way. That's human nature. That's psychology. They know that, and they implemented that on a worldwide basis.
If you enjoyed this short clip, go ahead and click here to watch the full episode. And make sure to click here to subscribe to our channel to watch all other episodes of the WiseNuts podcast.